Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Ashley De Hoyos. I'm the curator at Diverse Works here in Houston, Texas. Thank you all for joining us for our second info session for round 15 FY 2020 Idea Fund regranting cycle. I will briefly go over introductions and let everybody from the Idea Fund team introduce themselves, but before we get started, I just wanted to say that if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A function or use the chat to send us a message. Today's presentation will be a overview of the application, and then we'll have time at the end for Q&As. So again, I'm Ashley De Hoyos. I'll be hosting today's info session. I'm the curator at Diverse Works, and I will pass it over to Mary.
Hi everyone, I'm happy to have you here today. I'm the curator at Aurora Picture Show, and I'll pass it to Danielle.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Danielle Burns-Wilson, and I'm the curator and art director at Project Row Houses. Thank you all for joining, and am I going to pass it back to Mary?
Lisa.
Sorry, Lisa.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa Guevara. I am the round 15 intern for the Idea Fund.
Okay, so Mary's going to lead us in a brief land acknowledgement, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Thanks, Ashley. I'm going to do the land acknowledgement. We believe that truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection. We would like to acknowledge that our offices are located on the ancestral lands of the Atakapa, Ishak, Karankawa people and the natives peoples that share the Southwest Texas region, including the Como Cruz, Tonkawa, and Quahutican. We acknowledge that this land is occupied, unceded territory, and pay tribute to them. We honor their elders, past and present, as well as future generations. For those of you who would like to do the same, please share your own land acknowledgement in our chat. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to pull up the presentation. Give me 1 second. So for those of y'all that are just joining, please feel free to use the chat to introduce who you are. Lisa is managing our chat function and will also field any questions to me or Mary and Danielle. And then, yeah. So as I said today, this will just be a brief overview of the Idea Fund and kind of our process. So the Idea Fund is a regranting organization or a regranting fund that is supported by the Andy Warhol Foundation for Visual Arts. Our mission is to provide grants to individual artists or collectives in the greater Houston area that support innovative, experimental, public-facing visual art projects that expand our understanding of how art exists in the world, address community needs, and exemplifies new ways in working for and with community. The Idea Fund has been in service since 2009. Over the last few years, we have been able to support 146 projects involving over 493 artists from the greater Houston area. In 2020, for round 13, we actually, instead of doing project grants, we did 65 individual artist relief grants in response to COVID. And as we have grown, we've also increasingly have been working with creative communities in the greater Houston metropolitan area and have advanced from 8 surrounding counties to 9 counties, including Austin County last year. The Idea Fund is administrated by Project Row Houses, Aurora Picture Show, and Diverse Works. Each one of us represents our organization. And then, as I said, we're funded by the Andy Warhol Foundation for Visual Arts. Okay. Sorry. So our timeline. Our applications launched on August 31st. We do a general newsletter and call. We have our application coming up exactly almost a month from today. Applications will close on November 15th at 11:59 p.m. So that is right before midnight on that Monday, November 15th. We will have our jury review in December, and then we will announce our award notifications early January. And then we'll have our annual award reception in February. And then the grant cycle for the IDEA Fund is usually from award notification January into December of that year, so 2020. We do have one more info session outside of today's info session, which will be November 6th in 2021 at 2:30. This is a Saturday. If you know anybody else that is interested in learning about the IDEA Fund, we do encourage you to share or to have them reach out to us. We will be having, like I said, another info session. All of our info sessions usually cover the same material. The difference is sometimes the questions that are asked to us from a public perspective are different. So you may get different information during the Q&A, or have your question answered differently, not differently, but in a broader sense, more information. Okay, so who can apply? The IDEA Fund, as I said, supports individual artists, artist curators, collectives, and collaboratives. You can apply for the IDEA Fund as an individual, a new collective, an existing collective. You are eligible if you're a student at any of the universities. The only ineligibility that we have is nonprofit status, so you can't be a nonprofit organization applying for project funds. But the other graphic eligibility that we have is, as I said, Houston and the greater surrounding counties. So anybody can apply as long as they live in Austin, Brazoria, Chambers, Fort Bend, Galveston, Harris, Liberty, Montgomery, or Waller County. And as I said, it's individual artists, artist curators, collectives, anybody that's collaborating on a project. It doesn't have to be something that is established pre-existing to this grant cycle. You can come together, and we've actually had several grants that have, collectives that have formed together just to apply for the IDEA Fund. We also fund past TIF projects and individuals who have received the emergency relief grant. So y'all are available to apply if you have applied in the past and received funding. Anyone who applies, the proposals will be read through a jury process where we invite jurors to review applications both on submittable and in person. Funded proposals will take innovative approaches to the urgent questions of our moment and create lasting impacts on its intended communities. So ineligibility, in terms of the projects that are not eligible, as I mentioned, any projects proposed by a 501c3 nonprofit. All of our grant funding goes to individual artists or collectives or collaboratives. Projects in which lead artists live outside of one of those 9 eligible greater Houston area counties. So we do, the IDEA Fund, support artists in Houston in the greater area. So you can live in one of those counties. You can have if you have a collective, you can live in multiple counties, or if you have our collective or an artist and are working with somebody that's in LA, as long as you reside in one of those 9 counties, you and are the lead artist, your project qualifies. If you and the artists that are in California actually live in California and don't have any connection or live in any of the counties, then you are not eligible. So one of your lead, whoever the lead is for the project, has to live in the greater Houston area. Projects in which all artists reside outside of the 9 eligible Greater Houston areas. So again, we have the 9 county geographic eligibility. If you and another individual are applying from another county that is not within those 9 areas, then it would not qualify. And we do check applications prior to handing them over to our jurors for eligibility. So the Idea Fund partners and I look at zip code addresses. We check to make sure that, you know, they're not 501c3 nonprofits using different resources. The other thing is that makes projects ineligible is that projects do not have a public component, i.e. projects that do not involve the public via the process, production, or presentation, either online or in person. So a project that may not be eligible for this project is maybe you're just wanting to use the funds to create a new body of work. It has to be it has to be that and a public component. So whether or not, and we'll go a little bit more into this, the project has to have some type of public event, whether that be you're involving the community in the creation of the new work, or there's some type of opening, presentation or reception or something. So it's like yes and projects that an eligible thing that makes projects not qualify for the Idea Fund is that projects that do not exemplify innovative practice and contemporary art. So as before, if you're interested in using the Idea Fund to create a new body of work, there has to be something that makes it more innovative other than just creating an exhibition. So in terms of you know, having that public component involving the community, you know, you're collaborating with somebody to create the work, there has to be something that kind of it makes it more multifaceted. And this is just because the Idea Fund has always been a fund that supports artists, innovation, and exploration and creativity. And we're really interested in projects that are kind of pushing boundaries or questioning different kind of moments right now. So in terms of what types of projects will be funded, funded proposals will take innovative approaches to the urgent questions of our moment and creating lasting impacts on its intended communities. We seek to exemplify equity and display artistic originality and propel artistic growth in the city. So projects, activities, you know, must function primarily with and or have a strong connection to the visual arts. Some examples of visual art practices when we talk about visual arts: painting, drawing, sculpture, social practice, performance, film, video, photography, textiles. You know, it can be interdisciplinary, public art, new media, sounds, you know, digital film processes. And here on my screen, we have some sample images of works that have, you know, taken place. So this is A Lot of Land, which was Mike S., who was round 12 grantee. This is in Galveston, and oh my God, their name just Rising Tide Collective, who created a exhibition space in Galveston that was adaptable for flooding and that talks about climate. And they also have a printing studio. This was Sinquelas, which is Delilah Montoya and a couple of artists from Houston who did this project called Detention Nation. So this is just some more images of our past exhibition, or sorry, not exhibitions, but awards reception. In the past, we usually host the awards reception at Aurora Picture Show, where we invite our grantees to to come and give a kind of Pecha Kucha style quick presentation on their project before they get started. I'm going to quickly pull up some examples. Give me 1 second. So I'm pulling up some examples of recent exhibitions that have been presented in the last couple of years from Idea Fund applicants. You can see all of these projects on our website, theideafund.org. So first I'm going to highlight one that is currently up. This is Bria Lauren. Gold was made for her. She did an exhibition and had funding to create this body of work and have interviews, and was really interested in creating this installation that was expressing the beauty and the femininity of Black hood women in the South. And this is currently on view at Lawndale. And we also had artists from Civic TV who applied for their exhibition 9, which was in collaboration with the Photo Fest. This exhibition was supposed to happen at the height of COVID in 2020. And so what they decided to do for their public presentation was they installed the exhibition, and then they had an online gallery with extensive documentation and different virtual tours. They also had a 3D exhibition virtual. So we saw a lot of projects in the last year because of COVID that have used a lot more online formats. Another example of a project that had to adapt with COVID that was recently released was by Slant Rhyme and Raven Crane, or Ryan Crane. And it's called the Black and Brown Art Biennial, and they did an exhibition on their website that talks about, it's called Soil Tongue, a Southern Language. And so they, instead of having their traditional exhibition because of COVID, they were able to do a online exhibition. So these are just some of the examples, and you can see here online. A lot of the Idea Fund applicants have also used Instagram. We also have the Bio Art Biotorium by Henry Sanchez, who created a shipping container in partnership with the in Easton with the Buffalo Bayou Park, and they do different art and science interconnected workshops and kind of research. And then this is rounds 11, Rising Tide Project, which was in the photo. Again, this was an exhibition space that they created in Galveston that was supposed to be adaptive and respond to the space and the needs of Galveston, which, you know, it floods very easily. I'm gonna go back to our presentation. And okay, so how do you apply? So to apply for the Idea Fund, we use Submittable to accept applications. The application is completely online and will prompt you to provide the following items. You'll need a project summary and description. You'll need a resume and CV. You'll also need a budget and budget description, as well as 5 work samples. In terms of work samples, we accept JPEGs, video links, audio files, Word documents, or PDFs. The JPEGs, we do recommend not to be larger than 1 megabyte, as it does take a while to load. And sometimes the jurors actually have to download the photos to see them. But the applicants must state how their project also is related to contemporary visual art and describe how their work focuses on social and cultural equity, or nods to creating conversations. And so this is just a simple snapshot of our application here. And I'm going to pull the application up. So it looks like there is a question in the chat that's asking if it's mandatory to participate, that the artist projects are presented before the creation of the work. Yes, so that was our awards reception. That is, we ask all of the artists to share based on the project that they described or proposed in their application. It's usually 5 slides, 5 minutes, and it's like a one-night event, and we do it to highlight the artists and kind of celebrate the work that they're about to embark on. And then if you're a new artist and you don't have work samples, I will talk about that in just a moment. So going back to the application, so if you go to Submittable or to the website, theideafund.org, we have our link for the Submittable application on our main page. You can also find this application on our Instagram and our link tree. And it's also highlighted in some of the, on our Facebook and within some of the press. I think you can also find it on Glasstire and a few other places. But anyway, so the application, basically has this information about this year's round 15. We're giving away 12 grants of $5,000 each. Deadline again is November 15th, 2021 at 11:59 p.m. Goes again over the geographic eligibility info sessions where you can register again. And then if you scroll down, it just gives you more information about this process and answer some frequently questions. So you have an account. Okay. So now that I've signed in, you enter your name, for your artist group, or if you're an artist. So like if I was applying to this, I would just say Ashley De Hoyos. If I was a collective, I would be called B Collective, and then I would list myself as the lead artist. And then I would put all my information. So your lead artist is the one that's going to be responsible for the application. They're going to be responsible for signing the contract or the letter of agreement that says that, yes, you're taking on this project. They will receive a 1099 because the check will be issued in their name. So when you're applying, if you know that one of you can't be a lead artist because maybe you don't want to be responsible for the 1099, or you don't want to go over a tax bracket, or you may end up moving, I would really talk about who you plan on presenting and putting forward for the project in terms of a collective, who your lead artist is going to be. We have had had applicants in the past that have moved halfway through the regranting cycle. We've had applicants who have disbanded their collective, that have had to restructure things. And it really makes it easy on our end if we have the same person committed to being the lead artist from the very beginning. So we would do, who your lead artist is, their information, and their address. This is the address where we put in for eligibility check. So you would put, your street address. I'm going to use Diverse Works address, 3400 Main Street. Obviously, you would be using your own home address, Houston, and then 77004. You would then check which county you live in. So this address is located in Harris County. And then there's more demographic questions. So we ask in the application if you've ever been awarded an Idea Fund grant before. You can say yes or no. If you say yes, there's other questions that you can respond to. If you say no, then you can move to the next section. If you were awarded a grant from the Idea Fund, you just put what year you were. So maybe I was a 2010 awardee. And then if you wanted to list and say that you have not received an Idea Fund before, and share if you're a first-time applicant, if you applied last year, or if you applied every year, then you can select this. This information has no weight bearing on your application. This just allows us to track who's applying and how many times individuals apply, or how many repeat regranters we have that apply. So this is totally optional. But if you have, we do recommend that you fill it out, so that it just kind of lets us know. And then we also ask you a little bit about how you learned about the application. So I'm just going to say the website for this section. This just again allows us to track where most of our effort is being impacted. And then we have a voluntary demographic survey. So we have been trying to make sure that, or not make sure, but we have been trying to figure out ways in which we can track the individuals who are applying, as well as the individuals who are awarded, and make sure that we are creating and looking at the applications in a way that holds accountability and creates cultural equity and inclusion within the community. So we have started asking about voluntary demographics, just so that we understand who's applying, who's getting funding, who may not be getting funding. And this just allows us for our own internal information. It is completely voluntary, so you do not have to answer. For today, I prefer not to answer on these, but it really does help us in terms of accountability and tracking how, again, how we're making an impact, and who is receiving the grants, or again, who is not. So I'm going to put other and for not to answer. So then after you get done with the application information, we do ask you to define your artistic practice. This is just also, again, to help us break down this idea of visual arts and who is applying and where they may fit in within the visual art canon. So for this, I'll put visual arts, but then maybe it's research driven and it's multimedia. So then after you've finished all of these application questions, we go into asking for a biography, a CV, an artistic resume. So you have about 500 words here to introduce yourself to the jurors. From here on, the jurors see the application information, and the way that you should look at it is when you're applying is like you're speaking directly to them. So you want to tell them as much information about yourself to them as possible. The jurors don't know who you are. Usually there's one local juror that is a past regrant awardee who serves on a review process. And we may have someone who's regionally aware of what's happening in Houston, but you have to assume that the jurors do not know you. So you would include your biography. If you're a collective, you would be able to include all of your biography or collective biography. So we talked about being B collective. So I would just say B collective was founded in 2020, and we are photographers who create performance artists, performance art with bees and flowers. So anyway, so then you would just kind of talk about it. You could list who your individuals are in your collective. You can list in for individual artists, it can just be the basic biography. For collectives, you can list, you have room for 500. So if you had small bios for everybody, you could put 2 or 3 in here, depending on how long they were. But you can also highlight your members as a collective in the artistic resume or CV. So here we ask you to upload, you have up to 5 files that you can upload. So if you're in a collective, this would be an opportunity for you to list your like collective CV or resume, or you could list your lead artist CV, resume, and then a collective one, however you'd like to do it. But we would need those in PDF or doc files. And then you can also link to your website, and then we get to, and then it goes into the project description. So for this one, you'll put your title for your project. We'll say it's Be Awareness. Be Awareness is our project. And then you would just kind of write in a project summary here. You have up to 150 words. And for this project summary, it should be no more than 1 to 2 sentences. And you should think of this section as your elevator pitch. So in the biography, in the CV, you've introduced yourself, you're introduced your collective, you're starting to introduce your project. So your project summary should be like, this is what it is, very concise, and like, this is why you should fund me, within like 150 words, right? And then we have a longer project description section, which is 550 words or less. And this is where you tell us again who that you know more about your project. We want to know the who, what, where, when, why, and how. And we give you a couple of questions or points to consider in relationship to these 5 W's. So who are you and why do you want to create this project? What distinguishes your project from other projects happening in the region, happening regionally or nationally? What is your vision for your project? How will it be shared or experienced? So you would give a 550 words or less understanding of what the project is. We do have heard from past jurors that this section is very important in terms of giving as much clarity as possible. We do know that when you're applying to the project, you may not have a site confirmed, or you may still be developing the idea. And over the next year, if you're awarded, the project will continue to develop. But we do ask you to put as much information here as possible, and really to express, you know, on like why you're interested in doing this project, what it is. Again, the jurors do not know you, so they don't know what your intention is. They don't know what research you've done. They don't know, you know, if this has been a past project or not, unless they look at your, you know, until they look at your CV, resume. So you want to give them as much information as possible with the room that you do have. And then we ask you to express the goal of this project. So what is your intended, like if you were to get funded, like what is your intended goal, you know, that you would like to achieve? How will this project have made an impact on its communities and its audience? What is this goal? What is the goal? What is the impact on how you want it to be represented for you? But you just list, it's 200 words, you know, your intent and the goals for what you're trying to do. And then we also ask you to provide information on how this project relates to contemporary visual art. This question is a question that we get the most kind of, you know, people reaching out to us about, because it's a very like nuanced question. Obviously, in terms of our organizations, Project Row Houses, or Picture Show Diverse Works, our idea of visual art is very expansive. We know that it's multidisciplinary, that there are different ways that it can be represented. For the Idea Fund, because we are funded by the Andy Warhol Foundation of Visual Art, we do have to have this expressed in the application, and we do have to make sure that all of our projects do have a visual art component. So we ask you to describe or explain how this project is related to visual art or visual culture. And we do this by asking you to include some of your influences, your artists, or collectives, or how the project might have influenced your work. And again, this is just so that the jurors understand where you can see yourself in the visual art, contemporary visual art realm, and then also understand, like, you know, where your work is, you know, rooted in. So maybe in terms of your application, when you're applying, like for our Be Awareness project, maybe we're looking at artists like Tanya Bergara, you know, or social justice artists, or socially engaged artists that are making work that is creating community or something, and we're putting it in there and explaining how that is connected to visual art and culture. These can be as creative, it can be as plain and simple as, you know, is connected to visual art because it is rooted in photography or like painting, and, you know, explores, you know, visual art and culture or popular culture. So it really just depends on like how this question will be completely unique to you in your application. So then after you tell us and the jurors about your project, you know, what it is, what you hope to achieve, how it's related to contemporary visual art, we ask you to submit a budget. So you have an option here to upload a file that is in Excel, PDF, a doc. And so budgets is another portion of the Idea Fund where we get a lot of questions. And so we have traditionally, and we'll still do, submit a budget template for artists and individuals to use. So if you're on our application, it'll take you back to our webpage, which then you can download the budget worksheet. And okay, so here you go. So once you have the budget sheet downloaded, you can use this as a template to enter information about your budget for the project. You can put your project title. So ours was Be Awareness. And then you can put, you know, so for round 15, we also give kind of an explanation in the budget template. So the line items that are included in this budget are line items that are accordingly calculated when you're creating a project. So you have your artist fees, and well, you have your expenses and your income, but then you have your artist fees and breakdown. You have your production and public component breakdown if you're doing any marketing or, you know, community engagement. You can have a budget item for that. We have it where it says cash in, where you can list the expense that you're estimated to expend. And then you have your in kind. So this is anything that is being donated to the project, including any labor that is not being paid by the grant. So like, we'll go over it in just a minute, but if you're an artist and you have a practice that you're a carpenter, and in your carpentry work, you get paid a fee of $25 to $30 an hour, then you could put however long, if you're going to build something for the project, what your fee would be as donated income or donated expenses as in kind, so that it shows a true picture of like the different types of labor and capital that come through an artistic project. So then we'll go ahead and quickly fill this out. So in terms of our budget, we have, let's say we're going to give ourselves $2,000 as an artist fee. My per diem is going to be in kinds because I want to spend my funding on other things, or maybe I have another residency or another project or another grant that's going to pay the per diem. And a per diem is just a fee that you would give yourself if you have an artist, or say that you're building a project and you have artists that are out of town. and you're going to provide meal expenses in the form of per diem. It's just cash on hand for them to use. We typically don't see that in projects, mostly because of the amount of the grant size, but that's something that, you know, every project and their budget is different. But you could have travel, you could have housing. A lot of the times what we see in our budgets for the Idea Fund, it really is the breakdown of supplies, materials. So let's say that we're going to have $1,000 in supplies. Maybe we're going to have to get paint. We're going to have to rent a, we're going to have to get a canvas. Maybe we'll need to get yarn.
I'm sorry for interrupting, Ashley. I don't think we can see the template on the screen. We just see the Idea Fund website.
Okay, hold on. Sorry. I'm so sorry. Let me reshare this. Okay, can y'all see this now?
Yes.
Okay, so sorry about that. So I'm here where I'm starting to fill up the budget. So we've paid ourselves $2,000. We have $1,000 in supplies, materials. Maybe I'm gonna hire someone to build something and it's gonna cost $500. Maybe I'm gonna have documentation and that's gonna be another $1,000. Maybe I'm gonna buy some postcards and I'm gonna have a website. That's not 2,000, it's 200. And then maybe we'll do 100 flyers. So the idea is that we would put line items based on what you need for your project. And then once you have this down, the best notes that I can tell you in terms of creating a budget is to really list what this breakdown is. So if you have materials and it's $1,000, like we're getting paint, canvas, yarn, you know, explaining what those materials are. If you have documentation, like you can say this is for a photographer or videographer. And then you could also say, you know, like just kind of sharing these notes, because what the jurors looking at when they look at your budget is understanding if you, when you're based on your project description, how does the project match the funds that you're requesting? And that could be a question of feasibility and capacity. Sometimes we get budgets where people just put rough estimates and it's not clear that they've done research on, like, maybe they're going to have to build a large structure and they only had 500 for labor, but it's actually going to take $2,000. Or maybe you're putting most of your supplies material budget and say you're doing a budget of $4,000 for supplies materials, but you're not breaking it down and telling us what those items are, then there's some questions or red flags that might pop up. Another budget red flag that usually happens is that when we see a lot of in-kind donation, which in-kind does happen, it's not like something that's completely bad. It's good to show it, but sometimes if it's like everything is in-kind and like your budget is like really heavy on like artist fees and like supplies, materials, but there's other things that haven't really been figured out. There is some worry in terms of it not being a feasible project, because like what happens if all that in kind doesn't actually happen? Or let's say that you don't have, like, if you're really front heavy on materials and you had a lot of it was other stuff was in kinds, it just doesn't, it needs to balance in terms of how you're expressing your project and how it shows up. We do also recommend that when you're paying yourself, like you use the Idea Fund grant to also pay yourself. We really want to make sure that artists are getting paid. So when you're including fees for yourself and other artists, you can look at the wage calculator, which is a income system that kind of holds people, organizations accountable, and it kind of shows what a rate would be to pay artists based on a project and based on a project budget size. For the idea fund, if you're paying yourself, we recommend you pay 20 to 30% of your grant to yourself, and then allocate the rest for whatever you need: supplies, materials, marketing, things like that. So this is so you're going to have in this budget your cash and your expenses, and then you have your income down here. Your total expenses and your total income should match. So for this, we'll have say we're going to put, like, we know that if we get the grant, we'll have 5,000 from the idea fund, but maybe we're going to get 2,500 because we applied to let creativity happen. Maybe we have ticket sales that are going to make up the other $300. And then we had our in-kind services. So this, so let's actually do this 800. So we'll have 800 in ticket sales. So this budget here, your total income should reflect your total expenses. So you have your total cash, your total in-kind, and your overall budget. If you are applying to another grant, you can put notes in here that, like, say we're applying to let creativity happen, but we know that it's pending. You could put a note in here that just says projected. That way that the jurors know that, like, you are actively applying. There's other funds, like, especially if your budget is over the 5,000, then it would be great to show that you're looking at other ways to make up the additional funds for the project. And then the last thing you have here is you can tell us, if you have any budget notes based on your project. So this is like, if you've been doing research and you're like, say you are going to spend $4,000 on supplies, materials, and you want to let the jurors know that, like, this is what the supplies, materials cost. We had an artist one year where in order for them to actually make their work, like each piece of their work had a certain expense to it. So they broke down like how they calculated that fee based on the expense, the cost that it made to make one of those works. And they gave a narrative about that. This is really helpful because, again, the jurors don't get an opportunity to talk to you. What they are seeing when they're reviewing your grants is what you've submitted. So if there's any type of question, it's good to have budget notes or an explanation in your budget of, like, what it's used, what the funds will be going towards, because that allows them to understand a little better the project, and again, those categories of feasibility and capacity. I'm going to move on really quickly because I want to be mindful of time. Back to our application. Give me 1 second.
Ashley, before you move on to past budget, there's a couple of questions in the Q&A about budget that would be worth addressing to everybody.
Let's see. Okay, so is it expected to budget a fee for yourself? Yes, well, it's not expected, but we would highly encourage you to make sure that you're putting the funding in the grant. As we said before, if you're an individual artist or collective, your lead artist is going to be handling all the financial responsibility, including any types of taxes and financial information that's, it's going to be part of their responsibilities. So you could, in your budget, put, a finance line in there that and notate that this is going to help the lead artist, or help cover any types of financial costs, such as like when you do a 1099 and you get the $5,000, I think it's like 10 or 20% of that grant will be taxed. So you, as a lead artist or individual artist, when you're awarded, you are responsible for that. So you could put that in your budget as a line item. The other questions that we get in terms about budget is, obviously the $5,000, some projects are more than what the grant is going to cover. So yes, you can have a project budget that is over the $5,000 as long as you in your budget create notes and show where the other funding is going to go to, or in your project description you identify that what you're applying for with the $5,000 and what it will be used for. So like maybe you have a larger project that's going to be a multi-series of programs, and you're applying for one specific project, but you want the jurors to understand the whole concept. So you're applying, when you're applying, you could write in like the idea fund, you're requesting funds of $5,000 to support the first series of this production, or the first series of these programs or exhibition, and then explain a little bit in the budget notes what you're looking at or what the jurors are looking at in terms of why the budget is beyond the 5,000. Okay, I'll move back to the presentation. I know this is a lot of information, so I will let you know that we do have a new newish program. This is something we started last year, where you can sign up for one-on-ones to go over your applications before the deadline. So Lisa can drop the Calendly information in the chat, and you can schedule a meeting with us, and we can go over your individual applications as well and any individual questions. Okay, so now that you kind of given you some information about the application, who we are, and the budgets, we want to give you some application tips. So tip number one in the project summary and description, we really encourage you to keep it simple. Remember, you're addressing the who, what, when, where, why. And remember that the jurors don't know who you are, so you're introducing yourself and the project to them. And this is someone who hasn't read your application at all, or knows anything about you. So imagine that when you're writing it, it's somebody reading it for the first time. We also encourage you to express what the core ideas or lines of inquiry are behind your thoughts. Why do you want to do this project? Why is it important, urgent to you, to the city, to the community, etc. And then we also want you to tell us what your vision is. What do you hope to achieve? How will this project physically be presented? Do you have a dream location? Is it, are you hoping that you'll be able to collaborate with somebody or, other spaces? Who is your audience? That's a huge question. So in terms of, when you're writing a grant, like who are you doing this for? Like who are you anticipating coming to your program and event? So you remember that as you're writing your project summary and description. The second one is a budget tip. So be detailed and realistic. Again, if your budget is above $5,000, explain like why, that is your budget, how you're planning to supplement the other funds outside of the 5,000. That way that it, the juror knows that this project could happen, even if it's, even if they're only funding 5,000 of the application, like your total project budget, like really where how it's going to be impacted. And share your money research. So how did you decide to pay $500 for your materials? Again, this goes back to having really detailed budget notes. If it's going to cost you $1,000 to make a piece of work, or to hire a photographer, like break down like what that fund and that amount includes. That way that it just kind of shows your thinking and thought process. And then of course, yes, pay yourself. We recommend you pay yourself between 20 and 35%. I think I said 30 earlier, but this is to cover your creative and intellectual labor. It also allows you to to think about, again, the financial responsibility that the awardees have to think about once they're awarded. And then before I get back to budgets, or before I move on, I wanted to go back to budgets and say that the IDEA fund is not a fund that is paid out via reimbursements. The payments are broken up into a payment structure. In the past, it's been 3 payments. With this new $5,000 breakdown that we've had, we've actually been able to do 2 payments, one of 4,000, one of 1,000. The 1,000 being that you once you complete your project, you get the last amount of funding with the submission of a final report. So in terms of this, budget, think realistically, you'll have the funds if you're awarded upfront, but you will be responsible for them. And it's just helpful to know that, like, when you're budgeting, like when you're thinking about your how you're breaking down your budget, where that money is going to. Okay, so this is for our person who asked about work samples. Share your work samples that support your work, including project plans. If work samples are really important, they allow the juror to understand your history working within whatever you're proposing. So if you have if you're proposing a new film project and you submit, we would encourage you to submit film stills or film examples so they can understand your style and expertise. If you're embarking on a new project and maybe this is the first time you're applying to the IDEA Fund and you may not have work samples for this specific project, you could include any type of mock-ups or past work that alludes to the work that you're doing. So for our Be Awareness project, maybe that's a performance project, and maybe I don't have any performance examples, but maybe I have a writing that talks about why I'm interested in this type of work, or maybe there's another series that was older that is connected, or maybe I can share a mock-up of what the performance is going to look like, or maybe there's a sculptural element, so I have designs. You can show in your work samples, you can show new existing work. I do encourage individuals who have met with me when they start talking about work samples and it being a new project, if it is something that's in a completely new direction for you, I also encourage you to explicitly state that in your grant project description. That way that the jurors understand that this is something completely new that you haven't done before. And then when they look at your work samples, they're not looking for you, they're not looking to see that it's something that you've done, but they're looking at what skills and lessons you've kind of developed from your past work that could be implemented in this new work, if that makes sense. And we do give you an opportunity to share descriptions as an additional upload of your work, and that description page can be as long as you need it to be. So if you upload your 5 images and one of them is a maquette, you can, in your description, really break down like what that is rendering, and it gives the jurors more information behind your work. Again, the jurors don't know who you are. They're coming to your application completely cold. So you want to share as much information with them as possible within the limit constraints that you have. So this is just going to highlight some frequently asked questions. I'm going to check the Q&A again. Okay, looks like we're good for now. If you have any other questions, our Q&A question will come up after this section of our presentation. So feel free to drop your questions in the chat or in the Q&A field. So what types of projects are eligible for funding? Key considerations for applications, and what we ask our jurors to really look at are these 5 bullet points. So we're looking for the artistic and creative strength of the proposed project, the overall vision of the applicant, the capacity of the applicant to realize the project, the accessibility of the resulting project to the public as either an in-person or online event, project, or program, and the commitment to serving a local community. The project must adhere to COVID-19 safety precautions and restrictions to ensure the health and safety for everyone involved. This includes wearing masks, providing space for social distancing, limiting groups, and also just kind of paying attention to what's happening with our cases and hospitalizations. Obviously, we've seen a lot of projects this year that have gone digitally or had to form in some type of other way. But what we're really looking for in terms of considerations is if also just knowing that if you're planning a festival, if something were to happen, you could include, you know what to expect or share, not expect, but in your application or in your materials that, like if COVID comes back around, like what are your precautions and safety restrictions? But yeah, so, but we're mainly looking at these 5 key qualities here. Again, that's the artistic and creative strength of the proposed project, the overall vision, capacity of the applicant to realize the project, the accessibility of the resulting project to the public, and commitment to serving a local community. What are some of the past projects or ideas that have been funded? Since our grant cycle has been engaging the greater Houston area since 2009, we have years of projects that are listed on our website, each one of them representing a different type of idea, style, media process. So I encourage you to check out our website at theideafund.org. But for here, we'll also just say, like, these are some of the projects that have been in the past awarded. So the work of an individual artist, collective, or temporary association of artists, a project of temporary or permanent artist-run space, curatorial projects that focus on unconventional art practices, an exhibition that has a strong public component, publications of creative writing, including printed matter, online publications, public events, performances or interventions, site-specific installations, web-based projects, audio, video, and photo projects, online virtual engagements or events, social practice-based projects, large community events. We've had festivals. It runs, the what has been funded has run kind of the gamut. And like I said, the best resources looking at our website to see the projects that have been funded over the years. So what if you received an idea fund? Can we reapply? This is a question that we always get. As I mentioned in the beginning of our presentation, yes, all past Idea Fund project grants and Idea Fund emergency relief grant recipients are eligible for round 15. We, again, will focus on innovative approaches to, answering urgent questions of our moment and creating lasting impacts on its intended communities. So what is the review process and the selection criteria? I highlighted this just a few minutes ago in terms of the key components that we talk about. So all of our proposals are evaluated on the following criteria: artistic and creative strength, the overall vision, the capacity of the applicant to realize the project, accessibility of resulting project to the public, and the project's demonstration of community support or commitment to serving a local constituency. So we give our jurors these requirements or these key words or key statements, and we have a 2-part process. Actually, it's multi-part, but we have 2 main kind of reviews. We have our first round, which is done online via submittable, and then we have our final round, which is our in-person jury process or online jury process, where we actually talk about the top applicants and award the grantees. I will say that there is usually between 100 and 130 applicants who apply, sometimes more, sometimes less. And so there's a lot of applicants that the jurors have to go through, and the Idea Fund is a highly competitive grant. And so, to go from that many applicants to our top, I think 30 is usually what we end up on our final review. and then to whittle it down to our top 12 is a really hard process. We do offer application review before and after to talk about where your application kind of fell in that process. But we do have for our panel we have a panel of professionals who select the projects through both online in-person process. And then the panelists offer national, regional, and local perspectives from the field. Traditionally, our Idea Fund panel features the model of having someone who's a regranting partner from another city. The Idea Fund is one of 32 grant regranting programs supported by the Andy Warhol Foundation. And then we also usually have a past recipient with a local perspective, someone who has completed their project and can share and use their expertise from their last, their process through the jurying process. And then we also have a panelist who, again, is a national regional perspective from the field, which allows them to know about Houston and the projects that are happening here, but then also gives an opportunity for Houston artists to have someone nationally, regionally look at their applications. So the last, one of the other questions that we usually get is how many proposed projects can I submit? You can submit as many proposed projects that you like. I will say that from our past experience with jurors that if you're submitting more than one, there is a question on capacity as well as which one would be more important or that would be the one that should get funded. So like anytime that you submit more than, 2 projects, it can feel like maybe there's a lot of different ideas in your head and it could be that the juror may feel that there might be not a lot of focus if both you have all these projects in the pool that they're reviewing. So really focusing down on when you're applying like your top 2 projects, or if you're applying as a lead artist, you're applying as part of a collective and you have an individual project, that's usually what we tell people to go with. That way that, there as a collective, there is a focus that you will have to provide, but it's not 2 separate projects or 4 separate projects that you're trying to do in one year that may feel like you're having to split your time and energy. Also, too, the likelihood that all of your projects will get funded is very slim. Usually in the past, we've had to choose between one or the other when there have been multiple projects, or like I said before, the jurors have questions about the applicant and their capacity to focus on, multiple things. So just know that that is something that the jurors think about in terms of when they see multiple applications. But we do encourage you to apply and submit, group or individual applications. And then I talked about this. Yes, we offer application review. Lisa is going to drop this Calendly link into the chat. You can also find this on our main page on our website at theideafund.org. We offer these direct feedback sessions. We have them open until November 15th. And then after the application closes and the review process happens, we also have a review application session after we announce our awardees. So if you didn't get the grant for whatever reason, you can check in with us and we can give you a little bit detail. I have noticed that the application review sessions have helped because it allows you to really ask your individual questions one-on-one or to have us review your application and give recommendations. And I think that it's a great opportunity if you have the time and your application is ready to be reviewed, or even if you just want to have questions, we can do that with you. Okay, so that was a lot. I know. I'm going to stop share here. I'm going to ask Sydney, Sydney's not here. Mary, Danielle, and Lisa to come back on screen. And then we have a couple of questions. So in terms of the questions in the chat is our final presentation must the work need to be performed live if performance or would an edited digital document of the performance suffice? Is there a preference? I think for me, there's not a preference. I think with COVID times, there is, a call for having digital, releases. I think there's ways that you can engage your audience. Some of the things that we do at Diverse Works is we have, like, if we're streaming it on YouTube or on Vimeo, you can do a live stream and have like a Q&A with the artist or something. So I would encourage you to have a public component. If you are doing a digital performance that's released, that there is some type of like public event. Wouldn't you agree, Mary?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. I mean, especially with COVID, we're flexible on things, but there should be, maybe your live performance that you're going to record has an audience or is open to the public in some way, so that there is that kind of community interaction.
Our next question is, I know you said the awardee cannot be a nonprofit. Is it acceptable for the project to take place at a location owned by a nonprofit? Completely. You can partner with nonprofits. The nonprofit can't receive funding on your behalf or apply for a proposed project. So if you are going to partner with them, the Bayou Torium project is one where Henry had a partner lined up because the grant was more than what he was awarded, but he was able to buy his material costs and get a shipping container from another space. And so he had to work with Buffalo Bayou Partnership to actually place the container on the park lands. So yes, so if you have a nonprofit partner, or you can mention that in your application, but they just can't receive funds on your behalf, like directly from the Idea Fund, and they can't be one of us. So the Idea Fund, as the Idea Fund partners, we can't host or curate or show any of the Idea Fund work. So we have to stay unbiased, and we can't have any projects at our location. So yeah. Okay, so the question, there's a question that is: a visual pitch deck of your proposed project idea also appropriate to submit during the application process? Yeah. Yes, you can submit that in terms of like a work sample and upload it as a PDF. I sometimes, when I'm applying to grants, like to create a PDF of images as a curator, because it's hard to show like what my work is in just one image. So it's like, it could be a work sample as a project, and there's like a few images that it's like a PDF that tells the story. It looks like those are all the questions. Let me check the chat. Yes, we will be releasing the video on our website and our YouTube. You can also see our info session from round 1, which was hosted by Mary, on our YouTube channel right now. And then if you have any questions or concerns about your application, or just like, again, want to have feedback from us, we are happy to do application review sessions. And you can sign up at that Calendly link. They're usually about 15 to 20 minutes. We do ask you to submit some information, like your project description and text, before you meet with us, just so that we can get a better sense of what you're working on and how we can help you.
Iris asked, if I sell tickets or merch at my public event, could I give funds from that to a nonprofit? Sure, that's not a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, we also had one Idea Fund grantee who made books, and she sold some of the books and donated the funds to domestic violence shelter. So yeah, once you get the funding, like you can make that decision. And if you are awarded and you have specific questions, we will probably go over everything more in depth when we do our letter of agreement and our first kind of meetup session. But yeah. Okay, Mary or Danielle or Lisa, do you think there's anything else that the current participants should know about the Idea Fund?
No, I think you covered everything. I would just say, you know, when you're writing it, to just speak in your voice and speak to why you want to do the project.
Thorough, Ashley. Thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you everybody for hanging in there with us. You can find all the information on our website, theideafund.org, as well as in the application. We look forward to seeing you and your learning more about your projects. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.